Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we are specifically going to talk about Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, this amazing new D&D canon hardback by F. Wesley Snyder. And specifically we're going to talk about, so at this point, the player characters have a Dragonlance restored at the Temple of Paladine. So they're 10th level at this point. I'm sorry, they're 9th level at this point, because they're 10th level when they finish chapter 6, which is where we're at, which is we're doing the last section of City of Lost Names. Okay, so they are now in the City of the Lost Names. This is Anyari, the Istar city. So this is so this specific City of Lost Names is the crashed remains of Anyari, the flying city. Right. So the player characters are here. They've dealt with Demlin, and they know the history of the city. They also know they also have this Dragonlance, and at this point, they're in the city and they're trying to determine exactly what is being planned by the Red Dragon Army, right? And so they need to understand the situation in the city and actually specifically address what's happening in the city. So how do they do that, right? So what they do specifically is they do their investigations, and they find that the city right now has two Red Dragon Army commanders in it, and they end up dealing with this black robed mage, this human black robed mage by the name of Lozette, who is a Red Dragon Army commander. Okay, and he is specifically a mage who is gathering power, right? And we realize that the reason he's been brought here, right, is in order to raise this entire city, to make the city fly again, right? And the player characters realize this. They deal with Lozette, and they're about to get to the point where they're going to fight Lozette, this Red Dragon Army commander, and he says, "Hey, slow your roll. There's no reason for us to fight, and the reason why is I'm here to do my research. I want magical power." And and this place is a source of huge magical power. It resonates with all these dragon bones that are underneath of it. And I'm just doing my research here. And the reality is, I'm not that loyal to the Red Dragon Army. I think that some terrible things are about to happen here in the City of Lost Names. And that the power that is being played by with the Red Dragon Army, I know that the players in position are not going to be able to handle this kind of power. It's going to get very dangerous here. And so the reality is, you and I don't need to fight. There's another Red Dragon Army commander here by the name of Belfion. Now, actually, Belfion is a blue ancient dragon, and we find that out later when the player character, when Belfion reveals himself he's a blue ancient who serves Tiamat, right? And so, basically, Lozette is like, "Hey, you guys go fight Belfion and kill Belfion. You want to damage the Red Dragon Army, and really, I just want to slip away, and I will leave the city as soon as you take care of Belfion, and I'm positioned to leave already, right? So there's no need for us to fight. You go kill Belfion. I'll tell you where he is, and then as soon as your fight with Belfion occurs, I'll just slip out of the city." The player characters are like, "Bet, we don't really, they don't need an extra fight, right?" And so they go and they deal with Belfion. They find Belfion at this flying Citadel helm, okay? And Belfion shows his true form. He takes his true form as Belfion, this blue ancient dragon. Now, what's really interesting here is we do see, so Dungeons & Dragons has had this problem for decades, right? They want to do dungeons and they want to do dragons. The problem is dungeons are very limited. You go down and it's stony and wet and a bunch of monsters, right? It's not as exciting as having adventures in a city, right, where all kinds of things can happen, right? So Dungeons & Dragons has actually been moving away from dungeons. Dragons are a problem because they're so wickedly dangerous, right, that every time you put them on screen, there's a really good chance that some or all of the player characters are going to die, right, if you're running them right. So one of the things that we're seeing, we see this in Legends of Vox Machina Season 2, is as Dungeons & Dragons is continuing to paint exactly how dangerous these dragons are, one of the things it does is it says, dragons are they're magical and they can take many forms, right? And so if you're going to defeat a dragon, like one of the things that Dungeons and Dragons is saying is literally every non-player character who comes in front of the player characters can be a dragon, right? And that's really interesting to think about that, how dragons not only are incredibly dangerous in their actual form, right? Because, bite, claw, wing, tail, like there's a spell, right? They are lair action. They're incredibly dangerous, right? But they're also dangerous in the fact that they can actually take actions they can take leadership as humans, and they often do, and will get very involved in the overall in the overall plans of mortals. That's kind of the best way to describe it, right? So the player characters, they finally get to Belfion, and Belfion lays it all out and is like, we're gonna raise this city of lost names, and this is the Flying Citadel helm, and fights them literally as he raises the city, right? So here's what happens, right? The player characters get into a fight with Belfion, and the reality is at this point, at 9th level, with 4 or 5 of them, there's a good chance they're going to either be able to defeat Belfion, they're not able to stop him from raising the lost city, right? What they are able to do is they're able to either shoo him off or kill him, right? Regardless, the city of lost names finally lifts, right? And what happens is, and this, I love this book. It's absolutely fantastic. But there are some problems. One of them is the city of lost names, no matter what the player characters do, because they haven't done the work to raise the city of lost names, is not going to lift, right? And so what happens is the city of lost names lifts out of the ground. But based on how all this has been done by the Red Dragon Army, slipshod and, using a bunch of commanders all who hate each other, Tiamat's forces do not do a good, Takhisis. Tiamat is Takhisis. Do not do a good job of working together. And so what happens is the city of lost names shatters apart, right? And here we see this part where F. Wesley Sneijder is like, you cannot let the player characters essentially, the only thing that raises, the city cracks into different pieces. Hundreds, if not well over 1,000 people die as the city of lost names is shattered apart, and only one part actually rises, and that is a flying citadel, and that is the Bastion of Takhisis, right? So the player characters have already made their way to the Temple of Paladine. Now they see its counterpart, the Bastion of Takhisis, and it is a temple to Takhisis, a temple to the evil female shadow queen, right, Tiamat, and the 5-headed chromatic dragon, and the Bastion of Takhisis rises out of the city. The city shatters into parts. Hundreds, if not well over 1,000 people die, right? And the player characters really have no ability to stop this, right? And this, this is one of the rough parts of a pre-generated adventure. Is this is going to happen? Like this is where the story is headed, right? And so there's aspects of railroading here, right? But the city, the flying citadel comes up, right? And the flying citadel is the Bastion of Takhisis, and what we see is this battle station is fully operational. So at this point, not only is the Red Dragon Army done a very good job of bringing terror across the plains, right, across all of Ansalon, right, the continent of Ansalon, and specifically Ansalon, right? But you reach this point where the Red Dragon Army also now has a fully operational flying citadel, right? And what's really interesting is F. Wesley Sneijder is essentially saying that this is bad, right? One of the things that kind of surprised me was this idea that the city should, that the flying city, every time the flying city is talked about, Anyari, the city of lost names, all these, they're talked about in a way that it should never, that flying a city shouldn't happen, right? Which I think that's a little bit questionable. And at this point, the Red Dragon army has this fully operational battle station, this flying citadel, right? And that's where chapter 6, City of Lost Names, ends. Fantastic chapter, really, really interesting where F. Wesley Snyder is taking all this. Thank you very much for letting me share my thoughts on Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen with you. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.